Okay.
And we are ready to go.
I would like to open the Santa Cruz County Board of Education special board meeting on Thursday, September 30th, 2021. Open session, 4 o'clock, held by video conference only. First item is call to order, roll call, and establishment of quorum. Berenice, would you please call the roll?
Oh,
Berenice, I'm not sure. Did you hear me? Berenice, you're still muted.
Sorry.
So I see two boardrooms, you and Ferris, and I was getting a lot of background noise.
I think we've got it corrected at this point. Sorry for that, President Felicetti.
Okay, Berenice, would you please take the roll?
Trustee Acosta? Trustee Alta?
Here.
Trustee Nichols?
Here.
Trustee Roth?
as much as I can be, I'm here.
Trustee Sanchez?
Here.
Trustee Van Allen?
Here.
President Felicetti?
Here. Next item on the agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance. Dr. Sabah, would you please lead us in the pledge?
My pleasure. Raise the flag and begin. I pledge allegiance
To the flag
of the United
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I hope that sounds better to everybody else. The next item is approval of the agenda. May I have a motion?
So move.
Second. Oh,
Who made the
Yes.
second?
Alyssa.
Alyssa. Okay, I have a motion by Trustee Van Allen and a second by Trustee Alto for approval of the agenda. If there are no comments, would you please take, whoops. Okay, is there anyone who wants to speak to the agenda before I do public comments? Okay, seeing none, now would I have a roll call vote, please?
Yes. Trustee Acosta? Trustee Alta?
Yes.
Trustee Nichols?
Yes.
Trustee Roth?
Yes.
Trustee Sanchez?
Yes.
Trustee Van Allen?
Yes.
President Felicetti?
Yes. Motion is approved unanimously with one absence. The next item is public comment. You've got to mute your background noise and get a lot of feedback.
That's me.
Okay, this is an opportunity for the public to address the board regarding items that are not on the agenda. The board president will recognize any member of the audience not previously placed on the agenda who wishes to speak on any item listed on the agenda. Each speaker on any item on the agenda may speak up to 2 minutes, unless otherwise limited or extended by the president. The president may allot time to those wishing to speak, but no action will be taken on matters presented. If appropriate, the president or any member of the board may direct that matter to be referred to the superintendent's office for placement on a future agenda. I would note that there is more information at the end of this agenda. And I would remind you that on our September 16th regular board meeting, we discussed guidance on returning to in-person board meetings and decided to ask that all members of the public who wish to speak to an item provide your name before we begin public comments so that we have a sense of time required. You will be called in the order received. Is there anyone who wishes to speak?
There are no requests for speaking to the agenda items.
Okay, the item's not on the agenda.
During a special board meeting, public comment is only for agendized items. We don't
Okay.
allow topics speaking for non-agendized items.
Okay. The next item is correspondence. Berenice, do we have any official correspondence?
Nothing other than the CSBA weekly update that everybody was emailed this morning.
Okay. The next item is public hearings, new business, and action items. The first is 6.1, adoption of a resolution 21-15, declaring Bonnie Doon to be a grossly inappropriate setting for the release of a sexually violent predator. The state of California is proposing that the supervised release of a legally designated sexually violent predator to reside in Bonnie Doon, California. The placement of this individual in Bonnie Doon would reasonably impose a chronic fear for the safety in its residents because adequate monitoring may not be possible. The proposed residential placement of this particular individual in Bonnie Doon would raise legitimate physical and psychological safety concerns for its residents. The Board of Education will consider adopting Resolution 21-15. And I will note that Bonnie Doon School District asked all districts in the county to consider a similar resolution. I hope I didn't read too much of your presentation, Sandra. Would you like to speak to this item?
That's quite all right. You introduced it nicely. And I think you probably all read this resolution by now. But some of the major points involve that the Bonnie Doon community is not like all the other communities in the county. It has a unique setup about the houses being spaced apart, and the forest also interferes with seeing what's going on in your neighbor's property. And I read in the resolution as it appeared in its original form that people often walk on trails through their neighbor's yard. And that is pretty unique in a community to feel that way about your neighbor. And I think the people of Bonnie Doon wish to continue to feel that way, that their neighbors could walk through their backyard no problem. Also, the Bonnie Doon community has suffered enough, and that the trauma from having the forest fires and the number of houses that burned down in their community was very sad that the fire wreaked havoc on their community. And being traumatized by that is mentioned in the resolution as, we would like to make it easier for that community to recover. And if you have any questions, or if did somebody send in some suggested changes or additions, somebody who is associated with Bonnie Doon Elementary School, because it's in his email? Did somebody get did Rose, did you get a communique from a man named Mike?
So Michael Gigliardi is a member of the Bonnie Doon School District Board. He sent us some original language that they used and asked us to consider it. The resolution, I believe, that you have in front of it is something that was developed by our communications people and reviewed by you and your committee, Sandra.
That's yes. They gave us two forms of it, and we worked them together, and that's what we came up with. Was Mike satisfied with the one that was online, or did he have additional input? No,
No.
He's not here, so okay.
No,
I present it to you, and I do hope that you'll back this resolution. Thank you for considering. And if you have questions or comments, now would be a good time to make them, or Rose can field the questions.
Okay, first, is there any member of the public who wishes to speak?
We do not have a request to speak to item 6.1.
Okay. Then are there questions or comments from members of the board?
I have a brief comment.
Yes, Bruce.
This is, I think, technically Sandra's district, but I have a lot of friends and a lot of experience in the North Coast and the Bonnie Doon area, and I think that the description of that neighborhood and its vulnerabilities and what it suffered, and also what a great neighborhood it is and a great community. I totally support this resolution in the interests of those people and that environment. I just think that this location of this released prisoner, I have some mixed feelings, because if someone has done their time, we sort of have to grant them the opportunity to change their life. But when we have this category of the, whatever it's called, the dangerous sexual predator, that to me is a pretty extreme categorization of someone's behavior. And I have not a lot of confidence that this is the best place to test whether or not they have changed their ways. So I'm strongly supportive of this resolution. I appreciate Sandra and Nikki Barra for helping draft it. Thank you.
Are there other questions or comments?
I'll make a comment.
Yes.
I appreciate that this has been brought before us, and I agree entirely with this. And I'm sorry that it has to take an action like this for us to hopefully get the message out to the community. So thank you.
President Felicetti, I apologize. There was a hand raised that I didn't think was for this item, but for the next item. But it was, I believe this might be Mike. He raised his hand and just let me know now that he in fact wanted to speak to this item. Do you want to allow them for Mike to speak at this point?
Yes, please. I asked Mike Giardi to come and speak to us if he wanted to, and I apologize if we got him out of turn. Yes, please.
Mr. Gilardi, are you there? Can you unmute yourself? Mike?
There we go. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. There you are.
I apologize. I had trouble navigating into the meeting, but I think I'm here now. I want to thank you very much for taking up this resolution. And it's a steep learning curve. We've not had to face something like this in this county before. So I think the court is learning, the district attorney's office is learning, and our community is learning fast. And I just want to speak to one thing, which is that my position is that Michael Cheek, sexually violent predator, doesn't belong in any family neighborhood. It's not just a matter of Bonnie Doon, but it's a matter of any family neighborhood. Just isn't the right fit. But that's nonetheless what Liberty Healthcare is working to do. So my goal is to defeat this proposal here in Bonnie Doon and to continue to work to be sure that if he is placed in the county, it's in an appropriate place, and that the position of Bonnie Doon isn't just he doesn't belong here, but he doesn't belong in any family neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Michael. And I apologize for taking you out of order. Are there any other comments by the board? Seeing none, I'll just make the, Bruce, did you want to speak again?
Well, just addressing what the school board member said. I mean, I could imagine an amendment to the policy before us that adds a whereas. Basically, that says that this person should not be released into a family neighborhood. That's a pretty strong prohibition, and I'm not sure what neighborhood they could be released to if we said that. But the concern I share. So if other board members wanted to, I could try to dream up some words really quickly. But unless if Michael is still listening, if he had a phrase, I'd be willing to entertain it if the board is interested. Sandra, do you have any feelings about that?
Well, I think the phrase that you came up with is brief enough, and I wouldn't oppose putting it in here. However, most communities do have families living in them, but most communities aren't 30 minutes before law enforcement could arrive to help out in a situation. Most communities are closer to services that parolees need, counseling and other services. I think the remoteness of Bonnie Doon is an important element, and it is the remoteness of the community that makes me feel very uncomfortable with that placement, and the fact that it's such an open community to neighbors, and that I feel Bonnie Doon has suffered enough.
Bruce, did you have another comment?
Well, perhaps there would be something slightly different to say, which is that we could say the county board, we also support the Bonnie Doon School Board's idea, sentiment for change in the overall way that sexually violent predators are placed on parole, or something like that. That, in other words, rather than the just say no family neighborhoods, to say we recognize that school board is taking this on a bigger scale, and that we support them in doing that. I didn't really come up with the golden words for that, but if Michael's still interested, still listening, I'd be curious if he has any response to that. The one thing is, I do think we should pass this today. It's timely to do it today, so I'd rather not come back, at the next meeting.
And actually, to be effective, it has to be approved at a meeting before they go back to the judge.
Right.
So I will entertain a motion and any amendments in just a second. I'm going to make the comment that I actually discussed this with my husband. Not that you would care that I discussed it with my husband, but he is of a different perspective, that sexual predators that have been through the system and are being released from the system back into the community deserve to go someplace. And what community is going to want to have that person in their community? My concern kind of echoes something like Sandra's. For me, it has to do with the ability to have cell service and electricity, because we know in San Lorenzo Valley and in the mountains it can be real spotty. It can go off for periods of time. To me, that would limit the ability to follow this person, and if they're wearing an ankle bracelet, for example, and for anybody who felt threatened to call for help. So for me, it's not just the remoteness, it's the inability to have consistent cell service and electricity. So that's my comment. Sandra, did you have another comment?
I didn't think that we could support the resolution of Bonnie Doon without reading it before we put it in I like that idea of putting that in our, adding a whereas about that. But I don't think we can say that we support the Bonnie Doon resolution when none of us have read it. I'm sure it's fine. However, I think we should read it before we slip that in. And Bruce is raising his hand.
Yes, Bruce?
Well, I actually wasn't proposing that we say we support their resolution, but simply that we support their effort to reform the way sexually violent predators are placed in communities. Because they came and testified at our meeting and told us about it, and that is a higher level concern that I would share. So it would simply be one clause, not about their resolution, but about their And maybe I'm assuming something that Michael might be able to clarify, whether that's his desire or his board's desire to take it to that higher level of review.
I don't believe he's with us.
Okay.
He is.
Oh, he is. He's back.
He is in
Okay.
the audience. It's just that I just want to clarify that Mike is a presenter, not a public. So he's here as a presenter, correct? Presenter, okay. Just because it would be unusual to have a back and forth with a member of the public, and it would not be part of protocol. But he is a presenter for this item. So we'll keep him on as a panelist until this agenda item is completed.
Okay. I mean, he could consider what I just said as a question for him as a follow-up to his presentation.
Okay.
If that makes any difference.
Yes.
Thanks, everybody. I can just clarify, that was my personal opinion. My school board has not spoken to any larger scale issue about reform to, sexually violent predator law and placement on a larger scale. I just don't want to ask personally the county or other school districts to adopt a resolution that doesn't appreciate that it's not just our problem that we care about, or at least that I care about. I think it's just inappropriate to have this guy in any family neighborhood because it's just too frightening for children to live with this sort of menace that close by.
Bruce is raising his hand.
Bruce?
Thanks for clarifying that, Michael. So then I would be inclined to say to add a very short whereas, could even be near the end, that the board wishes to express concern about the location of sexually violent predators, the placement of them, the placement of sexually violent predators in any family neighborhood is of concern to us. I mean, I kind of get that. What if this were in the Santa Cruz City School District and they came to us? We don't want to say, well, so that only applies in our view to the remote locations. Sorry, I wouldn't want to be in that position, which could be implied from this resolution. So I could see that we just want to say we are concerned about such placements in any family neighborhood or something like that.
Okay, well, I see that as a amendment to the resolution. And I believe that the process is to address amendments first and then go back to the original resolution.
Mm-hmm.
Am I correct in that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
So if you would like to make that motion, Bruce, and please be as clear about the language as you possibly can.
Okay, then I propose an amendment that the last whereas read, and I'll try to say this right, whereas the County Board of Education is concerned about any such placements of sexually violent predators in family neighborhoods.
Okay, do I have a second?
I would second that.
Okay, I have a motion and a second by Trustee Van Allen and a second by Trustee Nichols. If there are no other questions, I'm going to call for the vote by roll call. Berenice?
On the amendment.
Excuse me, I'm sorry. On the amendment first, Berenice.
Yes. Trustee Acosta? Trustee Alta?
Yes.
Trustee Nichols?
Yes.
Trustee Roth?
Yes.
Trustee Sanchez?
Yes.
Trustee Van Allen?
Aye.
President Belisari?
Aye. The amendment passes unanimously. Next, we'll go to the resolution itself. May I have a motion?
I'll move approval of the resolution as amended.
Second, anyone?
I'll second.
Okay, I have a motion by Trustee Nichols and a second by Trustee Van Allen to approve the resolution as amended. Berenice, would you please take the roll call vote?
Yes. Trustee Acosta? Trustee Alto?
Yes.
Trustee Nichols?
Yes.
Trustee Roth?
Yes.
Trustee Sanchez?
Yes.
Trustee Van Allen?
Aye.
President Felicity?
Aye. The motion as amended carries unanimously.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Michael, for
Thank you,
joining
Michael.
us.
Okay.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank
Mhm.
you.
The next item is 6.2, discussion and possible approval of resolution number 21-16, authorizing use of remote teleconferencing provisions pursuant to AB 361 and Governmental Code Section 54953. And I'm just going to start this off. You may remember that this first came up, I think I mentioned it, that it came up at the CCBE conference. So there was a current going on. The legislation itself was introduced by local Assemblyman Robert Rivas in mid-September. On September 16th, Governor Newsom signed into law AB 3130. Gosh, I'm not getting this right at all. AB 361, enabling local public agencies to continue to use teleconferencing without complying with certain Brown Act provisions, and that the law would be effective October 1st. We are considering now as in a special session prior to our regular meeting on October 21st. This resolution was crafted by our legal counsel, Lozano Smith, to follow the law. And I'll just read the summary. In response to COVID-19 pandemic, Governor Newsom signed AB 361 into law, permitting public agencies to continue conducting meetings remotely in the following circumstances. A, there is a proclaimed state of emergency, and state or local officials have imposed or recommended measures to promote social distancing. Or B, there's a proclaimed state of emergency and local agencies meeting for the purpose of determining by majority vote whether as a result of the emergency, the person would present imminent risk to the health or safety of attendees. Or C, there's a proclaimed state of emergency and the local agency has determined by majority vote that the result of the emergency meeting in person would present an imminent risk to the health or safety of attendees. I'll remind you again that at our September 16th regular board meeting, we discussed how we might handle public participations and comments if we return to in-person meetings. In looking at space requirements and that type of thing. And that the Brown Act at the time would have required that if a board member wanted to continue in teleconferencing, they would have to go through the Brown Act processes of placing a notice, opening their home to the public, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The new law addresses those concerns about returning to in-person meetings inside of our boardroom. I'll just tell you that I surveyed members of the CCBE Board of Directors and various large adjoining districts to ours, and the responses have been all over the map, from remaining completely remote to boards and staffs in person only, and the public participating on Zoom, making their public comments using teleconferencing as we've been doing, to all board staff and public in person with very strict COVID guidelines. And I can go through and read the entire resolution if you want me to. Do you think that's appropriate, Ferris?
If people haven't read it and they're hoping that they're hoping to review it, that would be useful. We do also have a speaker to this item whenever you are ready for them.
Okay, and I will read it. I'll take public comments and then comments from the board. Resolution 21-16, resolution authorizing use of remote teleconferencing provisions, AB 361. Whereas the Santa Cruz County Board of Education, known as Board of Education, is committed to open and transparent government and full compliance with the Ralph M. Brown Act, known as the Brown Act, and whereas the Brown Act generally requires that a public agency take certain actions in order to use teleconferencing to attend a public meeting virtually, and whereas the Board of Education recognizes that a local emergency persists due to the worldwide COVID-19 pandemic, and whereas the California legislature has recognized the ongoing state of emergency due to the COVID-19 pandemic and has responded by creating an additional means for public meetings to be held via teleconference, inclusive of internet-based virtual meetings, and whereas on September 16, 2021, the California legislature passed Assembly Bill known as AB 361, which amends the Government Code Section 54953 and permits a local agency to use teleconferencing to conduct its meetings in any of the following circumstances. A, the legislative body holds a meeting during a proclaimed state of emergency, and state or local officials have imposed or recommended measures to promote social distancing. B, the legislative body holds a meeting during a proclaimed state of emergency for the purpose of determining by majority vote whether, as a result of the emergency, meeting in person would present imminent risk to the health or safety of attendees. Or C, the legislative body holds a meeting during a proclaimed state of emergency and has determined by majority vote, pursuant to subparagraph B, that as a result of the emergency, meeting in person would present imminent risk to the health and safety of all attendees. And whereas in order for the Board of Education to use teleconferencing as allowed by AB 361 after October 1st, 2021, it must first adopt findings in a resolution allowing the Board of Education to conduct teleconferencing for a period of 30 days. And whereas Governor Newsom declared a state of emergency for the state of California due to the COVID-19 pandemic in his order entitled Proclamation of State of Emergency, signed March 4th, 2021. March 4th, 2020. And whereas the Board of Education hereby finds that the state and local emergencies have caused and will continue to cause imminent risks to the health and safety of attendees, And whereas the Board of Education is conducting its meetings for the use of telephonic and internet-based services so that members of the public may observe and participate in meetings and offer public comment. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the recitals set forth above are true and correct and fully incorporated into this resolution by reference. Be it further resolved that the Board of Education has determined that given the state of emergency, holding in-person meetings would present imminent risk to the health or safety of attendees. Be it further resolved that the actions taken by the Board of Education through this resolution apply to any and all district committees which are otherwise governed by the Brown Act. Excuse me. Be it further resolved, the Board of Education authorizes the County Superintendent of Schools to take all actions necessary to conduct Board of Education meetings in accordance with Government Code Section 54953 E and all other applicable provisions of the Brown Act using teleconferencing for a period of 30 days from the adoption of this resolution after the Board of Education will reconsider the circumstances of the state of emergency. Passed and adopted by the Santa Cruz County Board of Education, State of California, this 30th day of September by the following vote. And I will just note that this resolution would have to be taken every month so that the next month would also be virtual. So you are simply considering a resolution for the month of October. Let me go back to my notes. So, Dr. Sabah, I believe you said we had public comment.
Yes, we do. We have Melissa Freebarn, who's going to be, I will be making her a panelist, and she'll be giving, is it 2 or 3 minutes that we were providing?
2, yes, 3 minutes for this topic. Well, let me think about it. She is not a presenter.
She's not a presenter. She is it's public comment.
Okay, then public comments limited to 2 minutes on this item.
Great.
Melissa,
welcome.
Hi.
Hi, and you have 2 minutes.
Okay. Thanks. Good afternoon, members of the board. I am a local parent, a local registered nurse. I have a 4th grader at Galt Elementary, and I'm here to advocate that you guys return to in-person meetings. I think it's very important for parents and students to be able to address you in a public setting. Dr. Newell just yesterday dropped the indoor mask mandate for our county because we're in the moderate tier now based on CDC guidelines. And I think it, in terms of health equity and just an equitable process, I would like you to consider that some families don't have a good internet connection. They don't have access to the internet. They don't have Chromebooks that are working. Maybe they're at work. Maybe they need to arrange childcare. And I think, you know, whether it's a hybrid meeting, whether it's in person and accepting comments over the internet, I would like you to consider that not all households are equal in our county. And I think it's really important with what's going on with the mental health lately of our children. You know, we're seeing a lot of kids with mental health issues. What happened at Aptos High, there were over 100 parents that came to speak out in the Pajaro district. I think that you need to consider being an example for our parents and our students, that you are asking us to send our children to school, right? And you are saying that they are safe in your
Melissa? Melissa, we lost you there. Melissa?
we've lost you. I would suggest that you turn off your picture. You can get better voice control.
So you had 15 seconds there before we lost you there, Melissa.
Oh, I apologize. All I was simply saying was I want you guys to model the way that I think it's perfectly safe to hold public meetings, and I hope that you take it under consideration and take it seriously. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your input. Is there anyone else from the public who wishes to speak?
There are no other requests to speak, President Felicity.
Okay, I'll take any comments and questions from the board. Yes, Bruce.
I have several questions and a couple of comments. One is that, first of all, let me just say I'm a strong proponent of public participation in meetings and enjoy it. And so what I want to find is the best way to have the most public participation. The ability of people to attend our meetings, in my view, has been kind of mixed since the pandemic hit and we stopped meeting all in person. I definitely heard from people that had never been to our meetings before and never been able to get to them, who were really happy that we added the remote capacity for them to attend and to testify and things like that. So I do think the speaker is right that there are some some families that don't have that kind of access. It's a tricky thing with public meetings because no matter what time of day or what day of the week we hold them, it conflicts with somebody's work schedule or school schedule or parenting needs or something like that. So there's no perfect thing where everybody can participate. So I'm kind of leaning towards really keeping our emphasis on health and safety. I just had a relapse of a sore throat that I had at the beginning of the pandemic in April last year that lasted for a month. I've never had a sore throat last that long before. I don't know if it was the virus, but it just came back a couple days ago. And so I'm feeling like I need to protect people around me just in case, and I'm going to go get tested. But I think that we are succeeding fairly well in Santa Cruz County because we have continued to be careful and in keeping the masking and so on. And so I kind of have mixed feelings about this, and I lean towards the idea of hybrid meetings. Now I have some questions. So first of all, I imagine that either a strictly remote meeting, but certainly a hybrid where some are remote and some are not, that this adds a burden to staff for staffing our meetings, for setting up the technology and so on. Maybe I'm wrong, and my question is, I guess, to Ferris, is that the case? Does this add complexity, cost? Does it warp your schedules? Is it a problem to do either hybrid or continue to do totally remote as compared to in person? That's my, and I don't assume I know what the answer is to that. Genuinely.
Yeah, I would say that, I mean, it definitely has been a learning curve for us to modify our protocols to incorporate having a Zoom-based environment. And I think that there would be, if you mentioned a hybrid, meaning that there would be some in person and some online, remote, or virtual. And I think that would also add a little bit of complexity to it, but not significantly. I don't see an additional cost. I do think that it would take some adaptation. We are also looking at some new technology, including a built-in camera at the boardroom. It's soon to be installed. And once that's in place, it'll make there'll be two cameras, one on for the speakers and the audience and one for the board. And it would make this hybrid environment definitely doable in that some board members would be able to connect remotely while other board members could be in person, and people could be in person or remotely.
So a hybrid could apply to both the board and the public, is what you're saying? Yeah. Well, I do have a lot of admiration for our COE's technology capabilities. So that's reassuring to hear that. My second question, we already heard from one member of the public, but I'm just curious as to whether we have gotten complaints either about our remote meetings the last few months or about people not wanting us to go back to in-person because of their concerns about health practices and so on. Have we had any kind of feedback like that? And I'm acknowledging that we did have someone today who expressed their opinion.
To my knowledge, I'm going to see if Berenice can share if she's received complaints about that specifically.
The only comments I've received from the public have been during the past public comments, there has been mention that they would like to address the board in person. But besides those previous comments from the last board meetings, I haven't heard anything.
There were some folks that have attempted to enter the building without masks and have asked to be let in to the boardroom. And they were asked to leave because they were not following the mask requirement. And they shared their frustration that the meeting was not taking place in person.
Yeah, and that's understandable. How about I know the county just announced that we had dropped into the yellow tier, which is wonderful news. Does their lifting of the indoor masking requirement, does that apply to us, to the COE offices? And that's separate from the schools themselves.
So or
do we have our own policy about that?
So the California Department of Public Health requires masking in school settings where students are present. And so a school site, we use the term school site versus work site. A school site becomes a work site when students are not present. So if I'm a teacher in a classroom and I'm prepping after school and there's no students there, then it's now a work site. And so the requirement for masking would only apply when students are present. Now, there is the masking requirement indoors for unvaccinated folks continues to be in place. So that's still a requirement at this point. But it does not apply to fully vaccinated folks.
So it's conceivable, and this has happened with our meetings in the past, that we actually have students show up to tell us what they think about things, which I love. Would that turn it into, in effect, a school site according to that policy? Especially before there are vaccinations for younger age people?
It's an interesting question. They're participating not so much as students at that moment, as members of the community, I think. And so they are not converting a board meeting into a school site by going to a board meeting. I believe it would continue to be a board meeting, which we would follow the work site requirements.
Okay. I think we're going to get some students at the October meeting. That's part of why I asked. And then it occurs to me that if we do want to follow one of the possibilities under this resolution of either hybrid or continuing totally remote, that this could become a regular agenda item on our agenda for the next month, that we could just make it a standard item for the duration, of this period, as to how to handle that without getting a lot of extra trouble.
It would have to be an agenda item every single month.
Well, that's what I mean. I'm saying we just make it as one of our regular items, like public comment and stuff like that, at least for the time being. I don't mean forever. So then my other question is, how is it for board members? Because for me, it's actually a convenience, especially when it's heavy rain, for me to ride my bike across town. I get there kind of drippy and wet, but I can do it. I'm mostly amphibious. I will be happy if the board wants to start meeting in person again to show up at the board. I miss kind of being in the building there and seeing people. But it is very convenient, and I have felt that we have had more public participation since going remote than we were having before. Although, again, as I said initially, that just was really different for different people's circumstances. So I'm sure we may also lose some people if we stayed remote. So anyway, I'm kind of in the middle of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Riz. Well, certainly that must raise questions for the rest of you. So please raise your hand if you'd like to speak.
I have a comment.
Yes, Abel.
So I think, like was mentioned, there's pros and cons to both, right? Being virtual or being in person. And I think there's a lot of factors, right, that go into that. Whether you work or not, and the different factors. So I think that ideally it would be best to kind of have a combined or a hybrid model. That way we don't kind of alienate anybody. We can just have that as an option for everybody. Again, I'm not sure if that's doable. I'm not sure if it's something that we can work towards, but I do feel like that's got a little bit of both of the best worlds. And those that do want to be able to be in person, can do so. Because there's definitely challenges. We had the one speaker who cut out because of her connection, right? So that was a poignant case right there. About that, in our previous item, we also talked about, how people in the mountains could have challenges with electricity, with connectivity. So I do think that, and again, people work, so it might be challenging for them to attend in person. So I think if at all possible, I think it would be best for us to kind of work more towards a hybrid model.
Thank you, Abel. Trustee Roth?
I believe that we should work towards the hybrid model as a real option. And since we need to bring this forward every month, I'm leaning towards we continue our practice that we have done the past 18 months for the next month, and put together the best possible hybrid plan that we can. and where especially that the public and the board has the ability to call in or be on computer. And I don't know if this is at all possible for this next month, but to have an outdoor setting for the public that could be broadcast to us and we can see them also. And then we don't have to worry about masked or unmasked. Anyway, I just say, let's take it month by month, but I would like to keep it the way it is for the next month. Thank you.
Thank you, Sue. Other questions? Other trustees? Thoughts? Okay, I'm going to give you my 2 cents. I'm very buoyed by the fact that, are you raising your hand again, Sue? Oh, okay. I'm very buoyed by the fact that the recent fact that our COVID data in the county is getting better. I'm also cognizant that the reason it's getting better is because we've been wearing masks and taking precautions. I remain concerned about meeting in person with board, staff, and the public without information on everyone's vaccination status. Particularly since a majority of our board, sorry, Abel and Melissa, are 60 or 65 plus.
How do you know that?
Since we will be considering this resolution every month, I personally would prefer not to return in person until I've had my 3rd booster, because I'm one of those 65 plus people I just mentioned. And I will note that today I will be resigning from my state position on delegate assembly and the board of directors for CCBE, because I do not have a remote option for meetings. And I will not go down to San Diego for 5 days with 1,000 people whose vaccination status I do not know. And that for me is the biggest concern about going back in person in any meeting. But that's just my 2 cents. So I also heard from some of you that we're also all over the board. Ferris, would you like to make a comment?
I would. One of the options that we can make, if with passage of this resolution, would be to make a room available here in the building for anybody who would wish to use it, where the board members could come here, but they could be alone in a building in the next door, basically, to the boardroom. This resolution would allow that to happen while other members are sitting in the boardroom. It might facilitate, that option for folks. I think that this hybrid idea is something that we can definitely work on, and it would allow for you to make a choice whether you are able and willing to come in person or connect remotely without having to post and make your location available to the public. But one of those locations can be here in the building if you're concerned about your health, where you would have an office space and you'd be able to connect directly that way. So I just want to make that kind of make you aware that that is an option that you can participate. You can choose.
Thank you, Ferris. And as I think I mentioned before, hearing from our colleagues, some of them, the board is in the building, but the public is either coming in remotely, or particularly in the situation where this up in the hills, there may not be connectivity. They would be someplace like the tech room, where they could make their comments. Or, as we discussed last month, we could work toward having, unfortunately, no more than 12 people, I believe, in the boardroom with us. Is that correct, Ferris?
There aren't any, there's not a distancing requirement in terms of 6 feet apart. And so we'd be able to set it up, how we feel is appropriate. We think that would probably be, we would want to keep it at about that, so that is, if we keep folks at 6 feet apart, we would be able to fit about 12 people in the boardroom in terms of or guests. And then we could use the tech center as an overflow room.
Okay. Well, board members, you have a resolution. Oh, Sue, here we go again. Yeah, turn your.
I would feel comfortable being in person if everyone was masked. If there's going to be people without masks within the room, the boardroom, I won't attend. But masked, I'll be there.
Do you still feel that we need to have 30 days to work this out, or are you talking about going back in October, Sue?
I'll go either way, but I think that it would be nice to have a month more of trying to get to a good IT solution for both online and in person.
Okay. Others?
Yeah, it doesn't sound like this is something that we should rush. It sounds like something that we should take time to plan. And if given the opportunity to continue to meet remotely, then I think that should be what we should aim for next month.
Yeah, I think I wanted to hear everyone else out just because I've been like back on campuses subbing and I'm comfortable with being in person as well. But I do think that President Felicetti, you bring up some like good points around like the booster and just health in general. And I wanted to be open to that as well. So I think that I'm going to echo the other board members on maybe the 30 days to really think it through and find a plan that everyone's comfortable with. I agree with everybody. I don't know if it's something to rush. And I think we could, with the right amount of time, find something that everyone feels really comfortable with.
Thank you. Sandra, you're on. No.
Yes, well, I've thought a lot about how the kids are back in school and they're wearing masks, 100% wearing masks. That every time I go to the school, they're all wearing masks, and I think it's great that the children are leaving their masks on all day, and I feel like my daughter is well protected, my granddaughter, I mean, and I don't really have anything else to add about this. From my own point of view, I like these Zoom meetings now that I finally figured out how to use them. But I do appreciate the safety of a Zoom meeting, and I also would be pleased to come to in-person experiences with people who are all vaccinated and who are wearing masks. The idea of being with an unmasked person when I don't know their vaccination status is very unpopular with me. So that's all I have to say. At 5 o'clock, there's going to be a news story that I was interviewed for about my resolution. So I'm going to have to leave the meeting pretty soon because I think it's trailing off.
Can you not tape it so that you can vote on this?
Oh, I'm going to vote on this. It's not going to be the lead story.
Okay. The only other comment I would make is I think we have learned, as I believe either Bruce or Abel or both mentioned, we have had a lot more participation simply because we've opened up more channels. And I would encourage us that no matter what we decide to do in the future, we even though it's more technologically difficult, that we leave a channel of some type, teleconferencing, to the public so that they can participate in our meetings in a more meaningful way. I know that's difficult to manage, but I think we've learned how beneficial it is to provide various ways for them to participate. Okay, now can I have a motion from somebody about something?
I move approval of the agenda that's the resolution that's before us now
For 30 days.
for 30 days.
Okay,
Could you accept an amendment that it be on the agenda next time too, and then we'll go from there. I think we need to decide that we want it on the agenda next time too.
okay. Well, it would have to be if we were going to do anything but have an in-person meeting.
Yeah.
So, Sandra, do you accept that amendment?
Yes.
Okay. Any other comments? Do I have a second?
Oh, I'll second.
Okay. Okay. I have a motion by Trustee Nichols and a second by Trustee Van Allen, who added one amendment that we have it on our agenda every single month until we make a decision to do one thing or another. And I wouldn't have it be that wordy. I would just say every month. Any other comments, questions? Seeing none, Berenice, would you please take the roll call?
Yes. Trustee Acosta? Trustee Alta?
Yes.
Trustee Nichols?
Yes. And goodbye.
Trustee Roth?
Yes.
Trustee Sanchez?
Yes.
Trustee Van Allen?
Aye.
President Felicetti?
Aye. Okay, the resolution has been approved by a majority vote as amended to include it on our agenda every 30 days for consideration. Dr. Sabah, you and the IT staff have a lot of work ahead of you to figure out how we're going to do this, and we appreciate their service.
Could I just,
yes, Cruz.
just a comment that one of the reasons that I want it on the agenda as a regular thing is I want the public to know that we are continuing to have this as an open question as to how to proceed, and we're looking for the best way. And in a sense, if staff get questions about this, I want them to understand it that way too. That you know, we made the decision for October, but we're going to keep the question open until we found the best way to get the most participation. So that's the context in which I wanted that amendment.
Okay, I think that's a very valid statement. Anybody else? Seeing none, I'm going to adjourn the meeting at 5:03. Thank you, everyone, for participating.
Thanks so much.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks, staff.
Bye.
Thank you. I'm up at UC, crazy.